Hello, welcome to the podcast from Duendelvin. I'm Taylor, and in this podcast, we will be exploring the world of Savarion. Here we have Ian and Kyle. Today, we will be discussing goblins. All right, so are they a matriarchy or a patriarchy?
They are a patriarchy.
That they are. Yep.
They
so
are.
we're gonna do kind of fun. So Ian is normally our guy behind the chair. All right. He is our guy behind. He's the guy behind the seats. The guy in the chair. He's the tech man, and he's out here today helping me talk about goblins.
Someone's excited for goblins, I see.
I do enjoy goblins. Goblins are some of my favorites.
All right.
Obviously, Dwarven supremacy followed closely behind by goblins. It's really funny because in the conflict, actually in the fall, they clash.
They clash. They clash.
They clash. They clash pretty good. Yeah, they they. So I'll get to this in a little bit, but in the fall, the way the story works, I was too quiet, and now I get to be nice and loud. The goblins felt like it was no safe place for them during the fall, and they were like, you know what's a safe place, and we helped build it? Durzan. Durzan is a great place to defend. And they did. They helped develop a lot of the things that were there. So everybody kind of knew about Durzan's defenses, but they were like, because we know what the defense is, we can overcome it. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, dude, the goblins are an absolute, they're a blast. All right, Tay, what you got for me?
Well, I was hoping to hear a little bit more on if they're matriarchy or a patriarchy.
They are a patriarchy, and it kind of breaks into, obviously they're male run, male oriented. The men tend to work the forges, because our goblins are craftsmen. They tend to work the forges, work the function, and provide materials to support that kind of stuff, while the women are taking care of the kids and teaching them and focusing on different craftsman capabilities that the women have to offer. Oh, I love you too, Josh. So, yeah, as far as the patriarchy goes, it's not a conflict really. I mean, it's kind of hard to put it any other way. That they're designed that way by their gods that they knew personally at one point in time. Though our goblins are shorter lived, so the lifespan not as long. We'll get to that as well. But yeah, that's their aspect as far as like men lead society. Really not much else to it.
All right. Well, what do they look like then?
Oh, our goblins are not green. They are blue. We have blue, pointy-eared, sharp teeth, second shortest race in Savarion. Ferocious, fierce, awesome.
Then who is the shortest?
Halflings.
That makes sense.
So, they tend to be more tribal, as far as their appearance goes. Armor for like their equipment is actually what stands out about them, and it's going to be well worn, well used, but like extravagant. Not in design, but in function and purpose. They get to adorn themselves with all sorts of like cool stuff. Dr. Lanesh is going to be showcased as far as one of the pictures goes, has fur that rings around. I don't think they're green. I could be. No, yeah, they're blue. I appreciate the heads up, Davey. They're blue and purple variants. So yeah, those shades of cool colors, because technically we have purple cats as well, which we'll talk about eventually. There are some Gatu, whole different setup. because our orcs are green and our goblins are a little more bluish in their tint. So I guess there's a little bit of green there. Yeah, we'll post the picture up here in a minute. There's a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, but yeah, mostly it's a combination of the two. I don't know what that color's called. You're my color
Teal?
theorist. Teal?
I mean, technically it's teal. It can also be considered aqua.
I think it's more aqua. I think we're looking at aqua skin. But yeah, they have very long ears. Usually adorned with jewelry. If you were a jewel crafter, obviously they want to showcase their work because they are craftsmen, which is kind of ironic because where they live, they don't actually live in well-maintained homes. They don't care about that kind of crap. That's not what I'm talking lean-tos, teepees, ramshackle homes because they're not affected by weather. They're just accustomed to it. They live high in the mountains. It's cold, it's blustery, it's ridiculous, and their capital is oh no, it just escaped me.
Look at it.
It's not Sergath. That's not it. It's not Azeral. It's not Shota. It's Siduri. Yes! It's Siduri. And it is literally high up on a mountain peak. And it is just... Its defense is its inaccessibility. It's not like the dwarves where they have their depression inside of a crater. They are literally just scattered across the mountaintops for places where they can get access to the ore they need, the gems they need. All the stuff is there, so they're more of our diggers as well. I'm going to talk too much, though. What else you got question-wise? Unless I didn't answer the question. If I go too tangent, I need you guys to help me come back in.
All right. That's pretty much the question. Is there anything else on where they live?
So yeah, their settlements are scattered all the way across. The only permanent, gorgeous function they have is one of their god gifts, and I think Ian can talk a little bit about them god gifts if he's cool with it. Heck yeah,
I can do that. So, their god gift was essentially this forge or crafting hut that you could reach out and grab any tool that you needed for when you're crafting. So, say I'm making a sword, I could reach out, grab a hammer to make the sword. And this helped because then they're not misplacing tools or forgetting where they left stuff. And this wasn't just for metalworking. It was also for if I'm making armor or jewelry. Whatever tool they needed, they could just reach out and grab.
Heck yeah. And the forge would accommodate size as well. So if you needed a small workshop, it would conform your space to be a small workshop with a table, a chair, good lighting. It would adjust to your needs as you walked in and needed it. Which is
And it
really
was
cool.
in Siduri, right?
Yeah, that is the capital city, and it is the focal building. It's the only super major structure that Siduri has. Because we'll post a picture of Siduri, and you'll see they have kind of huts that are out there. Lean-to's not the right word. They definitely have huts that they'll build, but they're not concerned with does it keep the cold out. Sorry, I was thinking, and I went to space for a minute, just kind of enjoying because we have beautiful artwork that I'm excited for it to get posted up. But yeah, that's their god gift that was given to them for assisting in their divine purpose. And Ian, I know you know their divine purpose.
So, their divine purpose was crafting, specifically. Making tools, armor, jewelry, wagons, anything that needed to be crafted was their divine purpose. That was what they were designed for. So, if the dwarves needed swords, they would go to the goblins to get a bunch of swords.
The best quality swords.
The best quality swords. And they make the best quality of everything.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. They also continuously hone their craft. They're always striving to one-up each other and be better than. So they continue to make advancements in their specific crafting field. We can get to this as well. They're also they developed a way. They with the help of the the dwarves are like, hey, we have an idea. And the dwarves are like, this seems awful, but we can help you figure it out. And they're like, excellent. So the goblins are the first ones to create money. Yep. Their
Oh,
society
boy.
actually has currency that they trade back and forth.
It's made from the souls of people.
Not quite the souls, but yes, the magical like energy that makes people move. Their essence. They literally, when you die, they stick a tap in you and drain out your essence and say, "Excuse me, I need this for money." And they do. They eventually make after the fall, and after the affirmation, the goblins utilize their knowledge of currency to create the Traders Guild of the Union, and
It's a guild.
Traders Guild, and that helps spread their use of currency and unifies the whole world during a time of disunity, because it's kind of hard to go back to a barter system when you can't really barter with skill sets or available options when everyone's just trying to survive. And then it gets to a point where the barter system is kind of imbalanced. When you're all living together, it doesn't really work out quite the same way anymore. So you just kind of have to, the goblins were like, we have a better solution. And what they were kind of hated for, because it was seen as terrible. It was low-key seen as, like you said, like taking the soul out of a human. Or out of a creature, but it wasn't that function. The soul still passes to the afterlife, or after the fall into the port of lost souls and becomes a battery.
That's not any better.
No, it's like, hey, you can go to the afterlife after you do your 20 years, you Duracell. But yeah, they all of their exchange happened with currency, and it was interesting because the very first person, so the goblins view it as, oh, you died, you can still be beneficial here. Let me turn you into a way that I can garner more equipment for my purpose. And the other races would look at that like, you did what now? You did what in his cup? I turned him into liquid, and then I solidified him, and I made him into a coin. Look, now he's here with me forever. I got Grandpa right here. I got Grandma over here. I got your cousin Fred in my back pocket, and your cousin Jenny. Well, she done helped me get some bread. Anyway, sorry, I went off for a bit. All right. Any other questions about that subject?
I don't think I have any more questions about that subject. How do they differ from other goblins in media?
Okay. Usually in fantasy, goblins are seen as weak or hyper prolific. They're strength in numbers. They're lazy, and they tend to be aggressive and evil. They're almost always seen as evil. Our goblins are not like that. They're intelligent, and yes, the Lanesh gets called Lanesh the Terrible. He's the leader during the fall, which is the name that is given to him by the other races, and he just embraces it because he's like, fine, you can call me that, whatever.
Was he the one who started the money making?
No, actually, Lanesh is the one that figured out how to insert gems into weaponry. He used that to kill his predecessor.
So in Savarion there are these gems of colors that you can put into weapons, and when you put it into your weapon, the weapon gets a benefit. So your sword now has additional strength or an additional power to it when you insert said gems.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. So he found out a way, which made these gems very covetous. Like, everyone wanted to have gems because it empowers your abilities as a wielder and the weapon itself potentially. Like, it kind of does both depending on the gem coloration. So yeah, there's some of them that you have this weapon, and while you're wielding it, and I'm trying to think of a better way to put this. Like, if I was going to make you bleed, the bleed would be more aggressive because of the gem I put in there.
Or you could have a staff that shoots fireballs on its own.
Yes, absolutely. You could infuse skill sets. And that's it right there. You could infuse talents into a weapon, which is something else that goblins discovered.
And were goblins the only ones who could infuse gems?
Originally, yes. They're the only ones who could do it. They found out, and they kept it a secret. They were like, no one else needs to know how to do this. And so a goblin weapon with a gem slot in it, you'd still have to go back to a goblin and be like, hey, I'd like to have this gem. And they can be like, all right, it's going to cost you something. And they're like, well, we don't have any currency. What do you want? What can we do for you? And they're like, oh, give me goodies. I want raw materials. I need you to give me this, 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 this. Oh, man. And, their behavior was unique as far as the races go as well, because they're the only ones who could handle conflict through death and didn't see it as a problem. Has to go back to the money. If they killed you, you added to currency. They wouldn't just kill you for money, but you wouldn't have murder hobos out there being like, I'm going to kill you and take you and turn you into money. That didn't work out so well. But there was this drive that they all had to do better. And sometimes the best test of a weapon was to test it upon somebody who was your predecessor and be like, my weapon's better than your weapon.
And then I'm going to hit you with it?
The best way I can showcase that is in combat. And that's kind of what happened, except Lanesh was so overpowered that when he killed his predecessor, he did it from the shadows. He was like, I don't even need to worry about this. And so the guy was armored up, right? That was his big thing. He's like, I got my armor, and Lanesh comes in there and goes, I don't care about your armor, and just stibbity stabs him and moves him out of the way. There was a secondary function of that as well. Lanesh felt like their leadership had stagnated them. They weren't progressing, they weren't moving. He had built armor and wasn't actually doing anything to develop his own gifts and skill sets and improve their life and their standing as they're getting ready to go to war. And Lanesh was possibly influenced? Not possibly. He was definitely influenced by the Horakai. They were like, bro, look at this dude. He's fat and he's lazy. He ain't doing nothing. That's not how you guys are. He's a disgrace to your people. Someone should do something. Someone should do something. And they keep poking him and prodding him, and finally he's like, fine! And he did something, and he took control. But if it wasn't for him, then the goblins wouldn't have mobilized. Anyway, I'm rambling a lot. I apologize. We are all over the spectrum here. What was the question originally?
How do they differ?
That's right. How do they differ? Oh my goodness. Other goblins in other stories are mean, are nasty, are evil, and are stupid. That's the thing I don't like either. Their shooting is very, very dumb. We had this long-standing joke with a group of friends that when we played our Goblin campaign in a D&D series, that they had their rock with pointy stick attachment, and that was technologically superior. Yes. Or sorry, pointy stick with rock attachment. So that way they could poke you with their stick and hit you with the rock at the same time. Pokey stick, hitty rock, makes me the best goblin. Not quite, not even close to our goblins.
And in
at all.
Savarion, it's my spear is the best quality spear that there is.
Absolutely. The goblin craftsmanship is more sought after than any other because their skill sets are so far beyond, and that's their divine purpose. Plus, they have the Great Forge, man, which unfortunately does not survive the fall or the affirmation. The Great Forge gets popped. But yeah, so that's one of the major differences. On top of that, they're not hated in the respect that goblins are hated by the other end, like, and bullied by other entities. They're actually sought after quite often. Like we talked about, they helped build the orc walkways. They're the ones that put the craftsmanship together and then showed the orcs how to make that happen.
The sky bridges?
The sky bridges, yep, the skyways. They're the ones that helped to build the defenses of Zufbar, I believe it is. The Dwarven capital. No, Durzan, not Zufbar. Durzan. Oh my gosh. They built the cannons, like they shaped them, that could hold the heat and handle that kind of extreme temperature variance. They're responsible for any major craftsmanship across the whole world. And
Were
so,
they
yeah.
the ones that first created, like, siege weapons?
Yes. I mean, there wouldn't be a real reason for it originally, because, I mean, like, you weren't attacking other cities, but the goblins would absolutely have developed the creation of siege weaponry. And then also, with that, of our seafaring individuals the dwarves took that knowledge of their ability to innovate and innovated a way to make those siege engines lighter and mountable on ships. So you would have a ship that's a siege barge that's just got this big old trebuchet and an unlimited supply of ammunition almost. It's just like, yeet, yeet. You want to sail away from me? Not today. Or to have crossbows, because we don't have gunpowder. And I mean, you would also have like the idea that you could focus magic through a launcher to launch fireballs further. It doesn't really work that way. So you needed siege engines to give you that distance, and goblins first created those and perfected the siegecraft. That is their baby.
Going back to what Taylor asked, is there any other ways that they differ from common fantasy?
I think I've covered all because they're not dumb. They're heavily sought after. They're desirable. They have the best craftsmanship. Not desirable as in like I want them as a mate, but desirable as in like I want their craftsmanship. I want them to be around because they build me the best homes. They build me the best stuff.
So they can build the best homes, but they don't?
They don't care about that on their end because they don't have any. Their enhanced gift, because they lived in such a harsh environment that it didn't bother them. The weather never bothered them, and so then they were actually given the their gift that was given to them by the keepers was, okay, we're just going to enhance that so you guys don't have to worry about any weather at all, period, ever. And so they're just comfortable at all times. So when you have comfort like that, it doesn't matter if there's a gaping hole where snow and cold is coming through your house because you don't notice. Like, it doesn't matter. Now, for security purposes, if they were building a vault, it's not going to be shoddy. Their forges, immaculate. If they didn't get access to the Great Forge, absolutely. Their craftsmen's houses were unparalleled as far as design and function. But their homes they lived in, who cares? Does it have a bed? Does it have a roof over my head? That's even iffy. Is there enough of a roof that I can get some sleep without the sun coming in and hitting me in the eyes until I need to wake up? Yes, then I'm good. Goblin. So that's why their homes are that way, but they're when you would go, what you would see is you'd see these gorgeous permanent structures that would be their craftsmen's huts, and then they'd go to this like like away from their craftsman's hut and into this shed or a shack or a family dwelling would be a long house with like they didn't really care about it because their kids weren't going to be affected by the weather either. Like it just was a thing. It also was what allowed them to work so closely at the forge, because if they're immune to all kind of weather conditions and heat conditions, they're also going to be immune to the heat of the forge. They can heat things to a higher degree. They can work in frigid temperatures, do the extreme exposure to hot and cold that can temper metal in a different way. Yeah. So that was it. And then it's like other than there's also their coloration is very different than most goblins. Most goblins are seen as green or some like, and then it kind of varies depending on their region. So you have blue goblins in other fantasy, but those blue goblins are like, we're ice immune. Then you have fire goblins who are like, we're fire resistant, which is really funny. Our goblins also don't launch themselves recklessly at things. They're not suicidal. You're not going to have some orc putting them in a cannon and launching them at somebody else. Or strapping them full of bombs and making them sappers. They'd be smart about it. All right. So yeah, that's how ours differ.
And we go over divine purpose with every race. So what is the goblins' divine purpose?
Ian already covered the divine purpose. Yeah, he hit us up with they're the craftsmen. They're our engineers to our dwarven scientists. The scientists come up with an idea, and then the goblins craft the idea, and then the humans apply the idea. So it's a lot of our divine purposes kind of come together. And they worked in tandem. That was the original intent when they were all put together. It's like, okay, you all support each other with your divine purpose. Everyone has a purpose and a reason. So like the Musketeer, who are developers of magic, they would continue to develop new magic, and then that would benefit everybody else. Like, hey, look what we found out that this can do. And then you're like, oh, hey, cool, because I never would have thought that I can control the air currents to make my fire a little better, or to trap more flavor into my cooking, or something like that. And then that gets applied in different ways as well. So it's It's always fun. That's how their divine purpose kind of kicked in and carried over. Then it kind of got corrupted, as they all did, with Vagog's interruption, and the divine purpose to craft the best became the divine purpose to be the best, and that's where things started to get a little more aggressive. They already have a short lifespan, so the death of somebody was also serving a purpose because they got turned into money later, but also it's my stuff is better than your stuff. You're obsolete. You're so obsolete that my stuff will kill you. All right. Any other questions on that? Do I need to clarify anything there? I didn't go too tangenty on that one, I don't think.
No, not at all.
Okay.
That one was pretty on topic for once.
Woo! Dang. You think after what? We're on 20 episodes? I'd be better at this?
It's less than 20, I think.
Okay, we're getting close to it.
I think this one's
18 or 19?
10 or 11.
Only 10 or 11?
Yeah, we're not
Oh,
that
man,
far
sorry.
in.
My brain went way too far in the future. We're not there yet. Okay, we have 20 videos. That's what I saw, but we only have, of those, half of them are doubled, so I think we have like 10 episodes. I think you're right. Yep. My bad.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
This one is 12.
did the money come before or after the corruption of Vagog?
It would have come after. Because the idea of doing that would never have crossed our mind. The time wasn't necessary. Vagog's corruption really kind of warped a lot of perceptions and a lot of the ability to interact with each other. And that being said, the goblins would stop seeing, like, it became more, like, they were already kind of rivalry, but they had like a healthy rivalry. And then after Vagog's intrusion, it became kind of an unhealthy rivalry. And we haven't really flushed this out, but there may have been a concept where I need to make this body go away. What can I do? Let me approach the dwarves with an idea and see what they can make for me, and then I can craft it. So it may not have had good purpose in the beginning, but it ended up shaping society very necessarily later. Because it's like, I want to drain this body of all its essence and make it unrecognizable, kind of a thought process. But yeah, what else you guys got for me?
Well, we have... I guess we're going to move on to what's their most notable creation other than the money.
When we talked about their gem crafting, we talked about a lot. There is a moment in time that kind of kicks off the fall. We talk about it in one of our episodes. A design was drafted, but it needed goblin craftsmanship because the Horakai were an unstoppable force. Everyone thought for a long time, especially Nargoth. Nargoth. All right, I had to confirm with our man behind the chair, who is Jeff today. He waved. Y'all can't see him. No camera for you today, Jeff. So Nargoth, who is the head Horakai, he's the biggest, the first, and he's one that knows how to make more if they die. Because they could die from being overwhelmed. It was possible. But the Horakai were designed to be the perfect weapon. And then someone came up with an idea and said, hey, dwarves, what if you were able to take a knife and drain the power out of a thing? And they were like, huh, that's an interesting idea. And so they started working on it. Then they were like, hey, we have this, but we don't have the capability to make a metal that has the strength to hold this kind of energy in, but we have a way that we can drain the energy out of a thing. And we kind of took the essence draining that you guys have already utilized, turning it into money, only this is just draining power in general, like draining essence and zeroing something out. So the goblins were like, oh, yes, we can craft this. So the dwarves and the goblins worked together to create a dagger, a prototype dagger. It got lost.
Oh.
Yeah, that prototype dagger disappeared for a little bit, and the next thing you know, Papa Nargoth got dead in a big explosion. Yarp.
Did someone steal the dagger?
So the dagger was reappropriated and utilized by a certain shadowy organization in our world. We have two major shadowy players, in the world. That dagger was commissioned by that shadowy organization and then acquired by that shadowy organization and then utilized by that shadowy organization to end Nargoth. Because this group felt that the Horakai being indestructible was a problem and they needed to showcase that they weren't indestructible and allow people to progress without having the fear of nuclear deterrent over their heads all the time. So they had this dagger commissioned, acquired this dagger, and then used this dagger on Nargoth, except the calculations were off. So when they stabbed the Nargoth, the power drained but didn't disperse and actually caused a big kaboom that vaporized everything, everyone, and all the evidence.
Wow.
Because Nargoth contains so much power?
Yes. Nargoth was created by the 9 weapons of Parvulcan, and the knowledge that was given to them the knowledge that was acquired also from the keepers who at this point in time were ageless and had been around for a very long time. And so they were supposed to be the biggest and the baddest. So when they got kaboomed, it started this whole series of events that was kind of unforeseen because the 4 brothers, who were the 4 first creations that Nargoth ever created himself, were like, hey, Dad's dead. We can't make any more of us if we die on the battlefield, so can you teach us how? And they're like, we'll get back to you on that. The keepers were like, maybe. And then eventually they're like, yeah, nah, you guys keep doing what you do, but we're effectively going to let you guys run the natural course. And when you're gone, you're gone. And we'll just move on from there. Apologize. So we went into not goblin history here. However, the goblins were effectively very responsible for the fall of Savarion because they crafted the dagger.
That started it all?
They crafted the dagger that started the fall. So the literal dagger in the back came from the goblins.
All right.
Yeah.
So we did talk a bit about how the goblins live and where they live, but how do they govern?
Okay. So they have a Brehim. I had to look and make sure I had the right phrase here. That is their leader, and it is usually their greatest craftsman. That's who runs their society. They're the only ones that do a bloody secession effectively. If you're better, then you showcase that you're better. You can challenge an open combat, or if you're successful in assassination and claim the assassination, then absolutely, you take that spot. It's not peaceful transference of power. It's not common. Usually, a lot of times, the person in power has to continue to progress their craftsmanship to maintain the top, because that's what stands out the most, is the weapons and skill sets that you develop in your crafting protect you from being offed. And if someone doesn't think they can overcome it, then they won't. So that's their governing style as far as how their Brehim is chosen. Then in the fall, after Lanesh takes power from his predecessor through assassination and inherits the title Lanesh the Terrible, he applies Dinesh as his champion. Promotes Dinesh as his champion. And it's an authority. Yeah, Jeff's got me going. He's got me helping out here. It's all authoritarian. What the Brehim says goes. Always. There's no dispute. There's no discussion. If you have a problem with it, you take it up in the ring. You take it up with let your weapon, let your armor, let your equipment, whatever you crafted, speak for itself. If you develop siege weaponry and you're like, nah, dog, you can't do this, and you're like, all right, bro, come at me, and you have a siege off. You're gonna have some goofy competitions.
Like my catapult can destroy your catapult.
Yep. It's in that regard, our goblins are probably our most violent race, hands down. Excuse me. But yeah, so Dinesh was his champion when Lanesh took over, and then their Forge Master hadn't really changed. Goldat was in charge of making sure people who were worthy got access to the Great Forge, because there's only so much space the Great Forge had available at a time. And so Goldat was our Forge Master, and he's the one that dictated who got to go in and what purpose was, or who was allowed based on their skill sets. So if you wanted to go and enter the Great Forge, you had to earn it. And whatever was crafted in the Great Forge was almost guaranteed to be a masterpiece, because everything you needed was right there. So a lot of times as well with the Great Forge, we're going to talk about this too much, when you put your hand out for a tool, the tool that it gives you is the tool you need at that time as well. So you're trusting the forge to help guide you in your craftsmanship skill. Because if you think you need a hammer because you got to hammer something out, and it's like, nah, dude, you need a dowser and a rag. You're going to reach your hand out and you're going to get what you're needing for that metal at that time to preserve its integrity and functional capability. It's really cool. The forge intuits what you need based on what you're crafting. And that's where Goldat keeps that in line, because it's not, you don't want to have someone who's mediocre going in there and he doesn't have the skill set to trust the forge either, because you have to have the skills to operate in there or you're going to make crap and the forge will consume you and you're dead.
The forge consumes people?
If you screw up in there, yeah, it's going to create a problem. If you can't handle what the forge is doing for you or the forge is helping you create, very likely you can die in an accident. It doesn't actually eat you. That's the wrong thing. But like, effectively, you go in there and you screw up, you're probably not coming back out.
Yeah, an accident.
Mm-hmm. Accidents. Definitely a thing. Accidents happen, and sometimes sabotage happens, but not necessarily in the Great Forge, because only one person gains access to the Great Forge. So if you get sabotaged in the Great Forge, you make Goldat real mad. He's like, yeah, absolutely, I'll let you win. But then it's kind of hard, because then there's two different minds working in the same workshop, and usually it separates itself. So I don't know. I don't think Goldat had the mastery to sabotage somebody. I think it was just you would go in there and sabotage yourself by your own hubris if you failed to trust the forge. And that's where you learn your temperance and your progression of, yes, and that's why he has to make sure that you are ready, that you have earned your master rank and status to enter that forge, because if you've gotten to that point and you're that good, then obviously you don't want to be lost and you become a treasure for the goblin people. You're a national icon until someone kills you. Because they're better than you.
So if I was a master working in the forge and I was training someone and they thought they were better, they'd try to kill me?
They'd let their weapons try and kill you, yes. It wouldn't be like, I'm going to assassinate you while you're working at the forge, because that's still dishonorable. And they're not unhonorable. Now, what Lanesh did was considered dishonorable, which is why he acquired the terrible name. But he didn't, like, he even showcased it later. Someone else effectively was like, I tried to stand up to him for what he did, and he cut him down without even worrying about it. And they had what was considered the best armor available, but it wasn't imbued, so it had no chance. It had no shot. He knew from the get-go that he was better than everybody else because his craftsmanship.
He used gems.
Because he developed his gems, and putting those into his weaponry set him so far above the rest of his competitors that they couldn't compete, or they couldn't contest. When they try, they die. And yeah, people were very upset with him at the way that he took it because of the assassination and not open combat. And they tried, and they failed miserably every time. So it was a bloody process, but eventually, yeah, Lanesh unified the entire people, showed them his vision for the people, which was, we can't stay here, it's undefended. We're going to go take Durzan, because that is a defensible location.
And then they died trying to take Durzan?
The earthquake took Durzan down before they ever got to it. They spent a lot of time developing, without going to the dwarves, which is what made this difficult and took more time. They developed siege weapons that would help them to defeat the defenses they created for Durzan. And then on the march with all these siege weaponry to go and take Durzan, the double earthquake hit and all their siege weapons were rendered worthless, but it also slowed down their progression in March. Though they did catch, I believe it was the Muscapert in a blizzard and finished off the Muscapert. So they were like, opportunity, because who's not affected by blizzards? Goblins, that's who.
So you talked about Lanesh and Dalesh, but who are some other key goblins?
Okay, so we can kind of go back in time here. Goblin representation, going way back to the beginning, was from Zulabar, which ends up being one of our, like, I believe our 9 major players in the world became notarized by being different measurements. Oh, and I was wrong. Their lifespan is 200 years. I apologize. I thought it was shorter. I even helped build these bad boys. But they have 200 years to develop their skill sets, I had to refix that real fast. Because I said they were short-lived. They're not. They're actually about midlife, I think. Yeah, they're Their lifespan puts them at mid-tier. Because I think halflings then are 90-year-olds. Halflings have the shortest lifespan. Okay. But
the way that goblin-sized society is, I feel like most of them don't even live to 100 half the time.
yeah, I think that can't be right. There's no way. I think we have to fix that as a thing, because our goblins should not live longer than our humans. I think we got to switch that around. All right, so we're having a quiet discussion for a minute here. We kind of go back and forth. I'm okay with 100. 100's a good number because it still puts them older than everybody else, or younger than everybody else, but older than the halflings. So the halflings still maintain our shortest lifespan, except for the fact that, yes, as you were saying, goblins tend to die at an aggressive rate because if they fail, they're dead. And so do our Muscapert, who are our longest lived, because if they blow themselves up, well, oops. So they have the potential to blow themselves up. Our dwarves have the potential to blow themselves up while they're doing experimentation. It's honestly not uncommon, we talked about this as well, to have like whirling blades of death pop up, or a metal suit of armor crush you on accident because you're working with pneumatics. Yeah, different concepts like that. And with the goblins, it's more self-inflicted. It's different, but yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, the goblins should live about 100 years. Yep. All right, sorry. So we're going back to it. Zulabar, who was our female champion of the goblins, was given the wand and used that wand with the rest of the 9 races to help subdue Vagog and put her in prison.
Okay, from a standpoint of the craftsman, why would she have taken the wand instead of making a wand that's better?
Because that wand was made by the gods specifically. Those were the weapons of Parbal Khan. She could not, on her own, make a god-tier weapon that was imbued with divine god power. And it was very, very, very early in history as well. So the technology that came later, that they developed more skill sets, wouldn't have been in play yet. However, the god weapons still overpower everything else that's been crafted because it has the creator gods poured their power into these weapons. It's also, these weapons become conduits for them to create things like the Shimbare, which were our first Terminators that were kind of failures. And then the Horakai, who were our more perfect killers.
If you don't know who they are, watch the Horakai episode.
Yes.
And the Keepers episode.
Shameless plug.
We don't shame here. We'll shamelessly plug our own content all the time. But yeah, that's why they didn't. The technology's early in history. Their technology wasn't there. So yes, Zulabar was the wielder of one of the god weapons for the wand, and one of the more notable goblin figures in history. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna pass away some talkie time and let Ian bring up the next one here.
Zirzin was
Yeah.
was the goblin who was the keeper. He was one of the keepers of the peace. He was a fire mage. He controlled fire. He was the leader of the keepers.
Absolutely.
And he was supposedly the most notable goblin who ever lived.
Absolutely. I mean,
Which is interesting because a lot of the leadership in After the Fall was goblin.
it's true, but this is during the time frame specifically when it was not the races combined together. This was when there was still the individualism of the races.
So he was really notable because he managed to lead not goblin.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first goblins to lead the not goblin. And yeah, he had a very long lifespan. Our keepers were ageless.
So, he lived for about 2,000 years and helped shape the world with some of the other keepers after the 1,000-Year War.
Absolutely.
And was he the first assassinated when they came in to get rid of the keepers?
Because yeah, the he wasn't the like he wasn't the first assassinated. It was kind of a group effort, but I laughed because like he would have been one of the more dangerous ones in that room. But I mean, we joke about it. Casting fireball in a enclosed space is not a good idea. His power would have been limited based on his terrain, unless he wanted to fry his friends. But yeah, all the keepers died together, so no one was fully assassinated except for Ayala, who skipped away, and Duendelvin, who was already secluded up in the sky because of her companion. If her super Terminator, as one of my friends calls her, super Shimbare, had been there, the Horakai would have had to put a lot more effort into killing the keepers, which is also covered in the keepers episode. But yeah, so the rest of the group was killed en masse. Ayala recognized the patterns that were coming and was like, "Chuck and deuces," and he dipped. He didn't show up. And yeah, like I said, they'd already separated Duendelvin to activate this plan that they had in motion, which is what had tipped off Ayala in the first place. Because he's like, "Why would they? Oh crap!" So yeah, those are some of our very notable goblins. I want to talk about this a little bit too. We don't talk about this a whole lot. The keepers came together at a time when it was absolutely unheard of to work in conjunction with the other races. That time frame was considered golden and was lost to history. Like, they didn't work together. They were all seen as superior in their own individualism, as far as like their races. So a goblin working with somebody else was something you kept quiet if you did it at all. You didn't. So to have him come together and lead the other races was huge. They elected him as their leader, but he took that role on and actually did a very, very good job of it.
So, did goblin weaponry with and without stones kind of get dispersed prior to the war?
It was like trophies.
Okay.
Killing like if a goblin fell in combat and you beat a goblin contingent, you would want to snatch up as much of their equipment as possible because it was tending to be better than yours, unless the group that you fought was like armed by an apprentice and not a master craftsman. So an apprentice goblin work is still better than most other races' master craftsmen. So yeah, that's how they ended up getting dispersed. On top of that, we don't have this before the 1,000-Year War. During Vagog's initial corruption, cultists of Vagog appeared. We talked about this more in the dwarf episode, and they were aggressively attacking every other group. And so they needed equipment to defend themselves. So it wouldn't be unheard of to have the goblins craft weaponry for people, like for champions of other races, to go and help quell the cultists that were in their lands before they all became super isolationists.
So with the goblins having the best equipment, would there be like people who are hunting down master crafting goblins
And
killing them to take their equipment?
well, or in trying to force them to do work for them. Yeah.
Okay.
You would have people like abducting a master craftsman goblin or convincing or subverting, which wasn't really a possibility. Like, you didn't have like spies that could be like, "Hey bro, you want to work for us now because these guys don't appreciate you." It wouldn't really work that well because other than the Horakai, they were very distrustful, like all races were, of each other, which is why the 1,000-Year War sprung up in the first place. And then again, obviously things like we talked about didn't get better for the goblins. It got much worse as the races learned how they got their exchange program, where the money came from.
So the goblins made currency from people's essence, and then spread it throughout the world, and the world didn't object to this.
At that point in time, the world was so broken that they couldn't work in the same system they had before. Different areas had different quality or value based on service. And so since service couldn't maintain an equal exchange rate, they had to have something to unify everything. And money became that great unifier. If everything had the same cost, no matter what what continent you were on or what kingdom you were in, it allowed trade more freely. and that's what the Traders Guild did. Is their biggest contribution to unify the world was, oh hey, here's the money, and now everything costs. They set the price and they said, okay, if it's this, it's costing this, and then there's some negotiation wiggle room, but effectively they set a limit, a ceiling, and a floor for items to make it more effectively tradable across. Plus, they needed a way to acquire food. We know this as well. During or after the affirmation and during the fall, the weather was insane. So you couldn't grow quite the same. It was harder to sustain food source except for one continent called Wabi. There's actually more of a reason than the weather, but we're not going to go into that. That's going to be a flora and fauna episode. But it was necessary to find a way to incentivize people to share. Because why would they care about what was happening on someone else's continent if they had everything they needed on their continent or abundance? And so it became a way to instill trade and interaction as well. Oh, we got a question.
Dave B has a question.
Inspired by your abducting masters. Okay. Keep going.
I'm curious / inspired by abducting master craftsmen. How close are goblin familial bonds? Like, if I had a master craftsman's kids, would he care enough to make his captors weapons?
So, do you have any insight on that one that you think about?
They're not family oriented, so probably not. They would probably be like, do you have my kids? Okay.
Kidnapping their kids wouldn't make one lick of difference to them, because unless their kids showed unless they had a promising individual in their familial line, they wouldn't risk anything to really rescue someone. And if someone got captured before they had the chance to showcase their skills, then there's no value to them. Once they were a craftsman of master renown, they would have been considered a state asset and too valuable, and you couldn't coerce a master through subversion, kidnapping, and a master who was kidnapped. Their pride, or possibly even their lack of facilities, wouldn't allow them to craft the quality or mastery that was expected. Ooh, he's got the good questions.
What does the goblin's diet look like in the goblin society?
So, growing in...
You can't really grow in the mountains.
Not really. They don't have a good, stable, solid food source. A lot of their stuff was trade. That's how they got their consumption, their food. So, wheat, plants. There's actually meat. Meat would be their primary staple because there's a lot of hunting you can do up there in the mountains. Birds, other mountainous beasts that are dangerous to hunt, but ultimately didn't really mess with the goblins because they weren't seen as viable food sources for other creatures. That's the best way I can put that.
And Dad, you bring up a good point. He said elves would have figured it out for them for equipment trade.
True.
But with their divine purpose of I need to craft the best thing, I need to make the best thing, would they cultivate crops?
Not in their purview. Not quite the same. Planting isn't craftsmanship. They might make a planter's box that would allow them something unique. We also kind of have to backtrack this a little bit. Essence is also a major part of their crafting process. So before they took essence and crafted it into currency, they were taking liquid essence and infusing it into their equipment to make it stronger. That was their big secret, is they would take the dead and use their essence to fold it into their equipment. And then, as far as, David's asked another good question because he wants to know more about the society as far as, if they don't care about their kids, how would their relationships work?
And do they develop friendships?
Absolutely, there'd be friendships. I mean, Lanesh and Dinesh were friends and cousins, but the cousins is less of a viable thing. They were friends. And yeah, there would be healthy couples. They would still have the healthy couples, but the couples themselves wouldn't risk the whole for the kid. I don't know how to put that. I'm trying to figure out a way to make that make sense. Um, that's
They
yeah.
wouldn't
Okay.
risk their craft to save a kid.
They wouldn't risk their craft to save the kid unless their kid was valuable to the people. So if their kid was on their way to being a master craftsman, then absolutely, like if they had potential and they could see that potential, then that kid is an asset and worth saving. So kidnapping goblins, and then honestly, their attitude kind of deterred people from kidnapping anyways, because they're like, "I'm gonna get you kids," and they're like, "Oh, please do, take this one."
Here,
And
you
if
have
you were
little
to take a
Timish.
goblin, wouldn't the goblin just fight back?
Absolutely, goblins are not like goblin kids aren't meek. They're ferocious, and when they would develop friendships, you'd have symbiotic relationships between craftsmen. Oh my gosh, can't breathe. Apologize. So you'd have craftsmen who like, I'm the greatest shafts maker, and I'm the greatest arrowhead maker. The two would be friends of necessity, as well as friends. Eventually develop an actual close relationship, not just through craftsman work, but it started off with, "Hey, I like what you do here. You make really great You make really great arrows with great fletching. My arrowheads do great for for our work together."
So, would those two people also be friends with, say, the person who makes bows?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the friendships would create in crafting communities naturally. There'd be kind of like a symbiotic relationship between I make this for you, this for you, this for you, this for you.
And you pay me for it.
Mm-hmm. David, yes, another good question. So would a couple be less of I love you and more of I admire my partner because of their craftsman skills? Absolutely. 100%. They would be like, "Bro, I saw what you did with that. That sword you made is phenomenal. And my shield and your sword together are an unbeatable combo. We should get married and have kids."
I love that.
But yeah, we're getting close to time.
Yes, so we are unfortunately out of time. We will be back here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, PM.
And so our next episode will be Tuesday.
And we will be discussing
Who we on?
the Simgatu, right?
Is it Sungatu next? I don't know.
I think it
Goblin.
is.
It's Sungatu. Halfling. That makes more sense. Our mini races built one after the other.
Smalls.
Yeah,
Little
Okay.
whittles.
our halflings. It'll be exciting because there are warlike people, the most warry of the warry people we have, which is really entertaining because their society, we'll talk about that, is less violent than the goblins internally, but more violent externally. But yeah, thank you guys for popping in. Always a pleasure. Hope we answered your questions. If not, leave the comments and we'll get back to you. So yeah, thanks for stopping by.